Oklahoma Sooners softball told UCLA, get out of here with that mess. We're number one. We're going to talk about that and some recruiting stuff on tonight's episode of Locked On Sooners Live. Thank you for joining us.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners Live on a Monday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. We got a great show tonight, a lot to talk about. But first, we want to discuss what happened with the storms last night. There's a lot of destruction and damage throughout central, a little bit into the eastern part of Oklahoma. Josh, you're in Norman. You've seen a lot of what's gone on and what people are dealing with. And we just felt like it was important to at least, share. We're thinking about you guys, for those who are dealing with destruction and their houses have been damaged. Man, just know that praying for you, thinking about you. Josh.
No doubt. Yeah. Well said. Completely agree. It took me, and this is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but just to put into perspective some of the damage around my house in our neighborhood, it took me a drive that maybe takes 8 minutes any other day. It took me an hour to get into the radio station this morning, just to leave our neighborhood because of power lines that had gotten knocked down. And actually it's, was more damaging, more devastating, just that little bit a mile east or less than a mile east. So I've seen, some of the damage up close and personal right in our neighborhood. It just missed where I live. So I feel very fortunate and blessed that just we got lucky, basically. But I know others weren't fortunate. And obviously there's a ton of property damage. I hope everybody's safe. That's, you get into this severe storm season, and ultimately I know that, look, the financial side, the property side, that's obviously that's a big part of people's well-being in a sense, right? It's you don't want to see your home get ripped apart, but ultimately the most important thing is that everybody's safe. So I hope that's the case. And obviously just thinking of everybody out there.
Yeah, it's always unfortunate when something like this transpires. And I mean, being in Oklahoma, if you're from Oklahoma, you've seen it a lot. But you've also seen people rally together. And this is where like the beauty of being an Oklahoman comes together is neighborhoods, communities, they rally together to support one another. And if there's anything that we can do here on Locked On Sooners to support you, whether it's just putting your story out there, just let us know. We'd love to be a part of helping you out. But we got a lot of sports to talk about tonight because it was a busy sports weekend for the Oklahoma Sooners. And Josh, we got to start with the top story on the diamond. And that was the Oklahoma Sooners softball team went to California, went 5-0, but they picked up I think significant might be an understatement on that front win by beating the UCLA Bruins, and not just beating them, absolutely dominating them. It was a game that really from the jump, Oklahoma was all over Megan Faraimo. Like, she did not have any room to breathe in that first inning, and it was all Oklahoma from the start.
Well, and Alex Storako was great for Oklahoma. So I think that is that's notable for OU for a couple of reasons. That obviously Oklahoma entrusted Storako to pitch in this type of game versus this type of opponent that, 20 hits, 14 runs, and a bunch of zeros and a run rule victory on the board's great. And it's a huge statement for Oklahoma. But ultimately, when we get down the road, outside of just the psych you out factor, ultimately you meet up in the Women's College World Series. How much does this result matter later? Okay, we can have that debate. I would argue still a little bit because you flexed your muscle, and it's pretty clear who number one is between Oklahoma and UCLA. But probably where it matters the most, John, is just the idea that, look, Oklahoma's bats heated up. They went yard. and a bunch of folks went yard. And Staraka was great. She hadn't really, because she's a transfer to Oklahoma and has been on a big stage in Michigan, John, she hasn't been on this massive stage with Oklahoma. Okay, this isn't the Women's College World Series, but this could be your biggest competition to a third consecutive national championship. So with all of that at play, the bats, of course, they knocked around 20 hits, and again, all the runs that they scored. The most important thing to me was what Staraka did. I thought that was huge for Oklahoma.
Yeah, so Alex Staraka, the Michigan transfer, she allowed just 3 hits, no walks, 5 strikeouts in 5 innings pitched. And I think it is huge that she got the ball in that situation because she's been really, really good this year. But I think you could have easily gone with Nicole May. Patty Gasso was very confident in Jordy Ball and her ability, but you go with Alex Staraka, who is the veteran on this staff. She's thrown a ton of innings in her career and wasn't at all in awe of UCLA, wasn't at all like taken aback. She came out and she was just, firing away from the beginning, letting them put the ball in play, but in areas that wasn't dangerous. Never allowed more than 1 hit in an inning. And so to be able to do that and have that kind of a dominating performance, it's just incredible. And, it's a team that coming into that game, the offense had been good, right? I mean, I wrote a story about it Sunday morning over for Sooners Wire about how the offense had been pretty good. They were averaging almost 9 runs a game going into the UCLA game, but it just felt like there was something just a little bit not quite right about the offense. But they were averaging 8 runs almost 9 runs a game. But what I felt like was, okay, Tiara Jennings really hadn't started to heat up yet. Well, on Friday, after not having a hit against Cal State Fullerton or Texas A&M, she goes on Saturday and Sunday and does what she does. I think she was 3 for 5 on Saturday, 2 for 3 or 2 for 4. I can't remember exactly on Sunday against UCLA. I'm going to look at it real quick. 3 for 4 on Sunday against UCLA with a home run and 4 RBIs. I mean, the player that is kind of the preseason favorite to be the national player of the year had just kind of been okay through the first couple weekends of the season and even into Friday. Well, she turned it on Saturday and was one of the best players in the tournament, on the field, on Saturday and Sunday. And you need her to be. You need her to be one of the best players in softball, which she is. And it was just a matter of time till she started to really turn things on. And that's what we saw. A 3 for 4 performance against the UCLA pitching staff that had 2 no-hitters in the previous week and had beaten several top 25 teams like Alabama and Florida State and Florida and Kentucky, Virginia Tech. Their wins, honestly, they look more impressive just based on top 25 rankings than Oklahoma's. And then Oklahoma went in and did that. And your best player showed up in the biggest game of the season to this point and was the best player on the field. I mean, you could even argue Kinsey Hansen, and I want to talk about her too, because she was out for the first couple weeks, the first couple tournaments of the season, had an appendectomy, missed some time, rightfully so, but came back on Friday, got a pinch hit performance, RBI. Her first at bat, drives in a run, gets an opportunity to start against Texas A&M later that night. Again, an RBI performance. She had an RBI in every single game this weekend for the Sooners, and then erupted. 4 RBIs going into the game against UCLA. She has 2 home runs, 5 RBIs against the Bruins. And you get that bat going again, a player who hit 24 home runs in 2021. You get her going again, her leadership, the veteran savvy that she has. The team just looked so much more confident having her back in the dugout and ready to play. I mean, it's just really good to get her back in the lineup.
What a confidence boost to this team. And it's so obvious that Oklahoma was on a mission to show, Baylor loss is not this Oklahoma program. And probably they heard a little bit of the noise about, look what UCLA has done to this point, and on and on and on. And lo and behold, not even just the UCLA game, John, just the weekend itself. We wondered what this Mary Nutter Collegiate Classic would have in store from a weather standpoint. How many of these games were they going to get in? What was that going to look like? And ultimately what it looked like is they got all of them in. And oh, by the way, Oklahoma run rules in for the 5. So for anybody out there, and there's a certain softball media member, yes, that Oklahoma fans are letting her have it back a little bit, because hey, would you toss that narrative out there about the University of Oklahoma and they're not going to hit a bajillion home runs the way they did a season ago, and then lo and behold, the team comes out and resembles a lot of what we remember from Oklahoma last season, John, where they run ruling for the 5. And oh, by the way, they hit 6 home runs. And Kinsey Hansen, yes, you're absolutely right, was I think you have to say, if she didn't directly unlock this offense, she gets a hand in it this weekend, and just that little bit extra over the top in the lineup for Oklahoma. But it looked like OU that we remember from these past couple of seasons. And not that OU hadn't looked that way at different junctures this season. It just, everything kind of pointed to this UCLA date to end it. But oh, by the way, it was terrific for Oklahoma all along the way. And it was a perfect 5-0 weekend. And then they go put the big stamp on it by dominating UCLA, who again might be the big hurdle to a national championship. So what a weekend. I mean, it just doesn't get much better for Oklahoma than it was.
You're exactly right. And the one game that they didn't run rule, they just won by 7. Just barely won by 7. So it's a team that really put it all together. Several shutouts. What was it? 3 shutout wins against Cal State Fullerton, Texas A&M, and UCLA. And then they also got the run rule win against Loyola Marymount. They're pitching well. They're hitting well. And the pitcher that most people consider to be the best pitcher on the staff, Jordy Ball, I think she's having a bit of a sophomore. I don't even call it a slump, but just, I think people have seen her now. And so she's going to have to figure out, okay, she's going to have to make some adjustments or lock back in and be the Jordy Ball that we saw a year ago. I mean, she's been good, but I don't think she's necessarily lived up to the greatness expectations that we had kind of come to expect. That's not her fault. I mean, she had such a great true freshman season that, of course, the expectations were going to be lofty. But I mean, Nicole May has been fantastic. Alex Storako has been fantastic. Bobby McKay mentions Kirsten Deal. She's been incredible as well. I mean, the true freshmen that have gotten an opportunity to play have been amazing. Jocelyn Erickson, she leads the team in home runs, batting average, RBIs. Your true freshman does that. So, I mean, will that hold up the entirety of the season? Maybe she's getting enough plate appearances to be a significant contributor to this team. She's getting opportunities and she's hitting well. Even against UCLA, she didn't have any RBIs, but she still went 2 for 3 and had a run scored. So she's doing her part. But I mean, she's providing the power and the run driving inability, which is great. While you've had that, while Tiara Jennings kind of gets settled in. And the craziest thing about all this is you still have a player in Sydney Sanders who hasn't really gotten going yet either. This is a player who hit 21 home runs a year ago for Arizona State, was a National Freshman of the Year finalist, had 60-something RBIs, hit 425, which is hard to do in the Pac-12. That's a really good softball conference in its own right. And she was amazing last year, just hasn't really found her groove yet. But when she does, my goodness, this team is going to be something else. And then we just talked about Kinsey Hansen coming back. Jada Coleman has been an on-base machine. I feel like every time I'm looking at, what's going on the field, she's got on base again. Whether it's leading off the game or leading off an inning, she just gets on base. And then her defensive ability is just spectacular. I mean, if it wasn't for Grace Lyons, Jada Coleman might be the best defensive player in softball. And I don't think that's much of a stretch. And she might even be the best defensive player in softball, and which is crazy to think. And this team has just been so good, and they can get better. They can even get better. And that is, to me, just mind-boggling that we haven't even seen the best of this team just yet. They were fantastic against UCLA with that 14-0 win. Definitely their best win of the season, but it can still get better. Now they're going to have tough tests along the way. They'll have some road trips that are challenging along the way that, might trip them up or give them more challenges, things like that. Nothing's going to be simple for this team because everybody's going to be gunning for them and going to give them their best. But this team is really good, really, really good. And that Baylor team is also really good. We're seeing that as well. And man, this weekend, I think just re-solidified who the number one team in the nation is, who the top dog is, who everybody is chasing, and that's the Oklahoma Sooners.
I mean, one Baylor loss shouldn't have changed everybody's opinion in that regard. But hey, UCLA had looked good up until they ran into Oklahoma, right? They had looked like maybe the number one team in America. And obviously, Oklahoma had a blemish on its resume. But man, it is what it is. Until somebody unseats Oklahoma, or until Oklahoma in these next coming years has some stretch where it loses 6 of 8 or 4 of 8 or whatever it could look like, one loss, you can't say it's not still Oklahoma. They are the champs until proven otherwise. And the champs came out and made a statement that we're not going anywhere. And yes, they're going to continue to get better. And that's why, not to say this to be arrogant or whatever for Oklahoma, Plank, I know a couple of times has said, well, what's going to happen when you have to restock and you don't have a TRA Jennings or a Jada Coleman? Well, guess what? There's going to be a Jocelyn Erickson. There's going to be somebody else. This program continues to restock and reload. And oh, by the way, the transfer portal, like you said, you've got additions there that haven't totally found their rhythm yet. This team's only going to get better. The program's not going anywhere. And until somebody, when it matters most, John, proves that they're no longer the gold standard, Oklahoma is the gold standard in softball, and that's not changing anytime soon.
Not at all. It's not. And again, they've had so many contributions from so many players. I mean, Sophia Nugent, she's been fantastic, really filling in as one of the catchers for this Oklahoma team. I mean, she's hitting 455. I don't know if that's a player that was on many people's radar going into the year, but has a couple home runs herself and has been really, really good. You look at, like I said, Sydney Sanders, she's only hitting 250 on the season. Elena Torres, another transfer from Arizona State who hit, well over 300. She's only hitting 269 right now. Alyssa Brito has been, one of your better players so far this season. She's got 3 home runs, 15 RBI. She's hitting 368. So you're starting to get contributions up and down the lineup and, getting your players back like Kinsey Hansen. Grace Green off the bench has been fantastic. She's hitting 400 with a home run and 5 RBIs. Like, what a great opportunity and what really a great resource for Patty Gasso to be able to go to the bench with a veteran presence like Grace Green, bring her in and just know, like, she's probably going to get us a hit or she's going to drive somebody in. Like, she's just that good of a player to be able to bring off your bench. It's like, back when the Lakers were bringing like Robert Ory off the bench, to help seal NBA championships. That, and kind of Grace Green is that, like, that veteran presence, is going to come through for you in the clutch. But yeah, it's just been a team that has really, really played well. They've got a lot going for them, and they got a great weekend coming up this next weekend in Norman, back at Marita Hines Field, get to open the season with Incarnate Word and the University of Kentucky. Kentucky is a top 25 team, number 14 in the D1 softball rankings. So that should be an interesting matchup as well. Josh, what else you want to say? What else can we say really about this Oklahoma softball team?
Oh, just that, again, it's a juggernaut. It was a massive statement weekend for Oklahoma. I didn't expect anything different. Well, look, I continue to sometimes just be wowed by Oklahoma. I say I don't expect anything different. If I'm being totally fair, I did not expect 14-0, maybe a couple of home runs. What wasn't necessarily expecting 6, but it's OU softball. So then in the same vein, I can't say that I'm totally shocked either. But I did expect a big time response from Oklahoma this past weekend, whatever that looked like. I thought they were going to beat UCLA. Told you last week I didn't want to live in any universe where Jen Schroeder could do another victory lap around Oklahoma. Didn't think that was going to happen. OU didn't let that happen. So impressive weekend. And now guess what? They come home for the home opener for the OU tournament where you got UIC and then a couple versus Kentucky. Should be fun for Oklahoma fans that have been waiting to get a look at this team in person.
Yeah, and to break down the numbers real quick from our buddy Seth Olivares, excellent Twitter follow. If you're not familiar with his work, over at Seth Olivares, big softball guy. He always breaks it down after every game, kind of where Oklahoma's at. 13-1, 4-1 versus top 25 teams, 9 run rule wins. outscoring opponents 123-13, 21 home runs, 9 shutouts, 5 errors in the 14 games, 110 strikeouts through 81 innings, and a 5-game win streak. So doing all the work for you there. Just crazy. We love to be amazed, and you'd think that after several seasons of seeing this team at work that we could no longer be surprised, and yet here they were offering up a 14-0 shellacking of what was once the number 1 team in the nation for a brief moment in time. But coming up, we're going to talk through some recruiting stuff. Man, there's some exciting and not so exciting stuff happening on the hardwood as well. We'll talk through other Oklahoma football nuggets as well on today's episode of Locked On Sooners Live. But first, let me talk to you about Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. It tastes great and it's great for you. Anywhere from 13 to 17, 18 grams of protein, 130 calories. It's fantastic. Low carb, low sugar, high protein, low calorie. It's really the best thing that you can get. It is Built Bar. Great flavors like peanut butter brownie, which is my personal favorite, mint brownie, coconut almond, coconut brownie chunk, Built Puffs, you name it, they got it. Flavors for everybody. Go to built.com. Use promo code locked15. Use promo code locked15 to get 15% off your next order over at built.com using promo code locked15. So Josh, some interesting nuggets came down the recruiting wire, I guess we could call it that, today from Rivals, and it was Geoff Ketchum, Texas insider over at Rivals, who, sorry, I get distracted by the chat sometimes, who issued Rivals Futurecast for a couple Oklahoma targets, one of them being Nigel Smith, the other Caden Durham. Caden Durham, the 4-star running back out of Duncanville, a player who's considered top 20 at the position. And another potential feather in the cap for DeMarco Murray, somebody who's got a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, agility, and is just a big time playmaker that Oklahoma could be adding to their roster. I mean, everything's kind of been trending that way. Sam Spiegelman of On3 Athletics or On3 Recruiting issued a prediction for Caden Durham to the Sooners back in December, and this one kind of continues to keep that trend alive.
Well, I'm not worried about our man DeMarco Murray finding running backs. Any sort of complaint about DeMarco Murray in the recruiting capacity or department is so long gone. It's so ancient history for Oklahoma. Oh, by the way, I think you've got a incredible 1-2 punch on campus right now, set to break out and be, I don't know. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk could be the best 1-2 punch in all of college football. I think that's I'm not going to say that that's a guarantee, but I think it's a possibility for Oklahoma. So I love what they have on campus. I love what they've brought in Hicks and Smothers. And oh, by the way, it ain't going to stop. DeMarco Murray's going to keep finding guys, whether it's a Caden Durham, whether it's some of these other highly touted running backs. You're talking about somebody that, according to 24/7 Sports, John, is top 20 running back right now, naturally, top 35 player in the state of Texas. Obviously, the composite rankings, he's a little bit further down the board than that, though. It's still early in the 24 class, as we've discussed with so many different either signees or commits or targets for Oklahoma. With the recruiting cycle being what it is, this is sort of the first look we get at the 2024 ranking. So Durham's somebody that we could be talking about before this thing's all said and done as a top 10 running back type, top 50, top 100 national player type. He's not quite there to that point according to the composite rankings right now. But look, man, in terms of running back, I got no concerns about Oklahoma. I didn't really have concerns anyways, because Oklahoma, just the rich history that you have at running back, lends itself, I think, John, to being able to land and sign running backs again and again and again. And then when you add somebody like DeMarco Murray to the mix, who's doing the recruiting and making the sales pitch, then you wind up with the news that we've got, which is Oklahoma might be the one that wins in this recruiting race against both in Alabama and in LSU.
Yeah, and Durham, along with a guy like Jeremy Payne, another 4-star running back that Oklahoma's trending favorably for. I mean, of course you want to play for a guy like DeMarco Murray. I mean, it's a rare combination to find a former player who led the league in whether receiving or rushing at his position, and also be a really good running backs coach and be able to get the best out of his guys. And I think we've seen that out of DeMarco Murray over the last few years, whether it was Ramondre Stevenson or Eric Gray this past year. Kennedy Brooks was really good already, but having DeMarco Murray and be a part of his coaching, I think that helped his senior season with the Oklahoma Sooners last year, or in 2021. But then Eric Gray, just having the breakout performance that he had a year ago, he became a feature back. He became a guy that you can give the ball to 20, 25 times a game and rely upon. And I don't think that was the reputation on Eric Gray going into the season. I think a lot of people thought, and myself included, thought he was kind of a 15 touch guy. And you give the other, 5, 10, you spread that out amongst the rest of the depth chart. But under DeMarco Murray, and with his tutelage, DeMarco Murray's understanding of what you have to do to be a workhorse back, because DeMarco Murray was that for the Dallas Cowboys for several years, especially the year that he led the league in rushing. Eric Gray kind of transformed himself. Like he became a stronger, more physical back, adding to the elusiveness that he had already previously. He just became a runner that was able to bounce off tackles and make plays after contact, which I don't know if he was that guy in 2021. But he was the guy that was expected to take the reins, and he rebuilt himself to be able to do that. So, man, seeing Oklahoma trending for these 4-star running backs, that's potentially, 3 classes in a row that they'll have really highly rated, running back recruits. So good stuff. Nigel Smith, another 4-star. Go ahead. You wanted to say something there, Josh?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've watched a very small snippet of Caden Durham's tape. I'm watching it as we speak. I love the patience that he has, and yet he hits that second gear. It's like boom. Once he hits it, it's quick, man. So he's a track guy. He ran 100-meter times of 10.7 and 10.72. So my man, Mr. Durham, can fly. And I think the other thing to watch here with Oklahoma, just kind of what you hear from a bunch of folks on the recruiting trail, is there's only a couple of seats on the bus for Oklahoma at running back, or there's a couple of seats on the train and it's about to depart from the station, and you don't want to miss your train ticket to the University of Oklahoma. So I think that's kind of working here at running back, is Oklahoma's probably only going to take a couple, and they're in on a bunch of top flight names. And oh, by the way, they have the track record, John, here of late, that they're going to sign those names. So again, you want a seat on the bus, you want to get on the train to Norman, you better hop on quick.
And that's like Marlo Stanfield from The Wire said, that's one of them good problems if you're Oklahoma. You're going to have players that want to come play for you and are kind of almost jockeying and competing amongst themselves to land those spots. So another player that Oklahoma received a Rivals Future Cast prediction from Texas Insider's Geoff Ketchum. And also I feel like I should mention, like, having a Texas analyst, recruiting analyst, acknowledge Oklahoma's spot in these recruitments and acknowledge where Oklahoma sits with these recruitments, I think that's significant. And I think that matters. I think it gives me a little bit more confidence that this is going to take place. Caden Durham's a guy that's been offered by Texas. So if this guy thinks that it's looking more and more likely that Oklahoma's going to land him, then I kind of I think that's important. I think that's significant. I know nothing's final until it's final, but it seems significant at the time. Nigel Smith, 4-star player out of Melissa, Texas, a guy that is really good, really, really good. 6'5", 260, according to 247 Sports. Already has a couple crystal balls in over there from some of our friends over at OU Insider, including Brandon Drum, Parker Thune. Gets a Rivals Future Cast from Geoff Ketchum, Texas Insider. So looking more and more likely, again, that a 4-star, highly regarded defensive line prospect, a guy that currently ranks in the top 50. He's number 40 in the 247 Sports composite, number 6 defensive lineman, and number 7 in the state of Texas, heavily trending towards the Oklahoma Sooners.
We think an edge guy for Nigel Smith. He's getting recruited by both Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis. And actually his primary recruiter is Todd Bates per 247 Sports. I'm watching his tape, and it looks like typically at least from this. Now, I would trust the professionals that are out there watching the young man more often than I am at Melissa High School, but it looks like he's right now kind of more edge type guy up front for Oklahoma, but 6'5", 260 pounds already. If that's what his weight is, John, I mean, obviously it looks like he's got great acceleration from the perimeter, natural getting off blocks, pass rushing moves, and you can work on the rest of it of, hey, do we want to fill him up and get him inside if you really want to go that route? Obviously, as you pointed out, I mean, right now he's a top 10 defensive line guy. And, oh, by the way, he's top 40 nationally. So you'll figure that other thing out, right? Whether he's going to be an inside or an outside guy.
Yeah, I think just get him on campus and then figure that out. I mean, he's a guy that I think he fits the multiple defensive front idea concept that Brent Venables would like. He'd like his defensive ends to be able to play, 3-4 edge or 3-4 defensive end, 4-3 edge, be able to move inside out, play a little defensive tackle in pass rush situations in a 4-man alignment. And I mean, because Ethan Downs is kind of that big, he's that tall, that size. And I think this kind of fits more of that mold, maybe a little bit more of the Rondo Bothroyd type, a guy that can flex inside and out depending on your defensive front and down in distance. So again, you get enough of those guys that can play multiple positions and multiple alignments, and that's just going to make your defense better. But I would say he's probably leaning more to edge to start his career. But I mean, he definitely has the frame to add 20, 30 pounds to, and potentially not lose any explosiveness. But I'm usually of the mind that, if a guy has that size, that length, and he's able to, do the things that he can do at 260, I just say build on that. Like, just make him stronger, make him faster at 260, and let him rush the edge, because he's going to have the length to really give offensive tackles a lot of fits. And then, let him be that guy. And then on pass rushing situations, flex him in as a 3 tech and just let him give guards fits with his quickness and athleticism. So, I mean, you're going to have a lot to work with when you've got Derek LeBlanc and Adepoju Adebare and potentially Nigel Smith and whomever else ends up in Norman. I mean, R. Mason Thomas, that's a guy I've kind of slept on. Completely forgot about him until a workout video. I was like, oh yeah, that dude's got juice. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year in his second year with the Sooners. So that's kind of where I lean is, let's let him continue to play on the edge. Let him continue to physically develop. He's not having to take a pounding on the inside, gets to get his feet wet as a defensive end. And then if you feel like as he goes along in his Sooners career that you want to add, 20, 30 pounds, he's going to have the frame to do that. So you got options there. You got options. Let's talk David Stone, because you threw that out to me, but also people are talking about it as well. But David Stone going to go on a visit to Texas A&M. Visits are visits. Kids are going to take as many visits as they can. And I mean, this is a time for them to get kind of wined and dine a little bit and really have the red carpet rolled out for them. You had to know that Texas A&M was going to try and be a factor in this for some time, because this is just what Texas A&M does. They go after defensive line prospects, and they're going to try and stockpile as many as they can, create this monopoly over them or at the position. And of course they'd go after David Stone. I wouldn't be surprised. But I still think it's going to be, Oklahoma or Michigan State. I still feel it's pretty confidently going to be Oklahoma, but I don't know. This just seems to me more like, hey, David, come down here and check it out. And David's like, hey, I don't have anything else to do this weekend. Let's go check it out.
Well, for Nigel Smith, who we were just talking about, A&M's one of the 3 perceived favorites in that race right there too. So A&M's done a good job. A&M's done a good job of late with guys up front. And so obviously you have that type of recent track record, and probably some of those guys are in David Stone's ear a little bit, that this is a place you want to come check out in College Station. But I still like Oklahoma's position on it. What I think is pretty interesting with David Stone is the disrespect that David Stone felt that he got on 3, had him ranked all the way back, which, look, this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a bad ranking to be ranked 64th nationally and 7th at your position. That's not all bad to be a 4-star 64 national guy, But obviously, David Stone quote tweeted that from On3, who I guess just came out with updated rankings, and he was all the way back at 64, which is different, right? That's much lower than you see across the board at a 24/7 Sports or a Rivals. And he said this just adds fuel to a fire. So I don't know if that factors in any way, shape, or form to the recruitment, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody's playing that angle up with David Stone that, hey, we can turn you into the 5-star or this or that. But I don't think it's bad from a development standpoint. I mean, it's always nice to have somebody who's motivated.
Yeah, get a defensive tackle with a chip on his shoulder. Like, that's all right. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Guys play a little bit angrier when they got that chip on their shoulder, and they're going to be a little bit more physical, a little more mean. I don't know, man. It's still really early in the cycle. Like this time a year ago, remember Jackson Arnold was a 4-star player. I think he might have still been ranked outside the top 100 in 247 Sports and Rivals and On3 and all that. But worked himself into a much better position at the end of the rankings. So I don't know, the whole Texas A&M thing. Like, I don't blame kids going on visits. It doesn't bother me. Well, even if you're committed, it really doesn't bother me because it is what it is. Now, obviously you prefer committed kids don't go on visits. I like Brent Venables' philosophy on that. At the same time, until they're signed, there's not really anything you can do about it. And David Stone going to visit A&M, like, let him go. Like, let him go see that the grass may not be greener out there in College Station. I've been to College Station. It's just kind of okay. There's nothing special about it. Sorry, Aggies fans, not sorry. Let them go see up at East Lansing and see Michigan State. Like, that's okay. He knows what Oklahoma has to offer. He knows what Norman has to offer. He's from the area. He's not going to see anything different than what he's seen. He's visited Norman probably half a dozen times or more. So what else does he need to see there? He can go see other places. He's got the strong relationship with the coaching staff and with Todd Bates. None of that's going to change. It's just a matter of, he needs to know that he knows that he knows. And that's what Brent Venables says. Like, don't commit until you know that you know that you know. And the only way he's going to know is by going on visits to other places and seeing that maybe it's not as good of a spot as Oklahoma. And if it is, it is. Like, if he goes to College Station and he thinks that playing for Jimbo Fisher and alongside David Hicks is the best spot for him, it's a bummer. Yeah, it's disappointing. But again, it's his decision, and it is what it is. Good luck to you. Enjoy College Station.
Well, and Oklahoma, we've talked about it so much. They do need a David Stone type, right? You need somebody that can be, an interior game wrecker. And yet, Oklahoma's going to find guys. They're going to find dudes. It feels like, I was maybe a little bit guilty of this too, that I trust Brent Venables and company, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis. I trust they're going to figure it out, John. Whether or not it's through DJ Hicks and with David Stone, I would love. Obviously, I think it's a primary recruit in this class for Oklahoma, but I trust that the in-house development. I think we're going to see that from Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis, and I'm excited to see these guys that they brought in this class with the Adabares of the world, LeBlanc, what that looks like as you go forward. Yes, would love a big nose tackle, defensive, nose guard, defensive tackle type. As Dominic says, you desperately need that interior guy. And you know what? The teams that win national championships typically have that guy. But I trust that Brent Venables and company they're going to find that guy, whether it's Stone or somebody else in this class or these upcoming classes. John, I think they're going to get those couple of guys.
And eventually, the thing that we've talked about on this show quite a bit, eventually the idea that this staff develops defensive tackle talent, and they're able to recruit it at a high level and develop it to become NFL players. Eventually, that's going to sink in with prospects as they go back to the Gerald McCoys and the Tommy Harris and the Christian Wilkins and the Dexter Lawrences at Clemson. Like, that'll ring true. The Vic Beasleys, like, they'll start to realize, like, oh yeah, this staff knows how to find talent and develop it into what could be an NFL prospect. So, and I think David Hicks and David Stone has that potential. You just got to get in the right situation with the right people to help that flourish. And, and it's like John Garcia said on our show last week when he's talking about Todd Bates and relationships. It's like, nothing's a sprint with Todd Bates. Everything's a marathon. Everything is, you're dating for a long time. Like, you're not rushing into any, marriage talks or anything like that. Like, you're building this thing. You're figuring out if you're the right fit with each other. And I think that does take time. But honestly, you don't know if you're a good fit unless you're able to see other things. If you're David Stone and that's okay. Like, there'll come a point when this is all said and done, and a lot of this worry will probably be for naught. I still feel really confident that it's going to be David Stone to Oklahoma. Another nugget on a 4-star prospect that Oklahoma is very highly favored to land, and that's Michael Hawkins. Parker Thune over at OU Insider 247 Sports reported in the OU VIP lounge. If you haven't subscribed to that, highly recommend that. That Michael Hawkins will be visiting Oklahoma on March 4th. That's huge. Like, and he even said he did not expect Oklahoma to get a visit from Hawkins before making a decision between the Sooners and TCU. But to get Michael Hawkins back on campus, I think that bodes well for the Sooners. Will it lead to a commitment? It's hard to say. But I even with the TCU stuff, I still felt pretty good that Michael Hawkins was going to be a Sooner.
Yeah, me too. Just because that's what you hear from the people in the know, right? That Hawkins has always been pretty strongly linked to Oklahoma. So hopefully that will be the first domino to fall in 2024. It's I don't think you get into any sort of a panic right now about the 2024 class, really, because we're on the heels of Oklahoma showing you and telling me and everybody else, be patient. Let the summer happen. Let the spring, let the summer happen. We're going to get guys committed. It's going to be a top 5, top 10 class. RELAX. Aaron Rodgers, you might not have gotten everything right, but you got that one right. Relax, Oklahoma fans. It's going to be okay. They're going to find guys to commit, but it would be nice, right? Just a little bit of relief to just see a couple of dominoes start to fall in the 24 class. And obviously, as everybody kind of always says, maybe it's a football cliche in recruiting, but you get that quarterback, as Dominic says right there, get that quarterback on board, and boom, you've got the foundational piece to start building your class out from, especially from a skill standpoint offensively. That's why I've always been fascinated and asked John Garcia and a bunch of folks, John, whether or not that David Stone type can be that guy for you defensively. I would like to believe that's the case, but I feel like we know it on a pretty obvious proven track record that, guess what? Highly rated quarterbacks attract highly rated running backs and attract highly rated offensive linemen and attract highly rated wide receivers and on and on and on. Okay. Like, the quarterback will bring those guys for you. Now, are they getting the defensive tackle and the linebacker and the safety? Okay, maybe not. But you get a quarterback on board, that's a nice start.
Speaking of the defensive tackle and the safety, Michael Patterson McDonald finally got some rankings, 4-star according to Rivals. But he's a guy that could be the big needle mover with David Hicks. Like, he's a guy that's trending towards Oklahoma, or not David Hicks, David Stone, but he's a guy that's trending towards Oklahoma. He and David Stone are tight. That could bode well for the Sooners. Could have nothing to do with it, but it's a kid that we really like, someone that we've seen a little bit of. That, man, he looks like a ball player, and that's what Oklahoma needs, especially in the defensive secondary. But speaking of Michael Hawkins connections, I mean, Davin Mitchell is a player that is being kind of projected as somebody that Oklahoma is very high on, Oklahoma is very high on his list and is looking to reclassify to the 2024 class. But I mean, there's potential there that Michael Hawkins, Davin Mitchell, the guy who's the 5-star tight end prospect in 2025, looking to reclassify, that could be a huge get for both, at both positions. And it's just what you talked about. If Michael Hawkins commits to Oklahoma, I think it makes it much more likely that a guy like Mitchell could end up committing to Oklahoma as well. So just a lot of tea leaves to read, a lot of signs to see, but it's just like we saw a year ago. It's still really, really early for Oklahoma on the recruiting front. Yeah, I think they'll start to get some commits and start seeing, a few dominoes fall, but it'll be, after the spring game, after the Champ U barbecue, that we'll really start to see a ton of momentum on the recruiting trail for the Sooners, just landing commit after commit after commit, just like we saw last summer. I think it's something like they landed like 75% of their recruiting class in the June, July, August months. So don't sleep on them. This team can recruit. They'll be just fine moving forward.
Well, and I think just even the identification of some players, I think you're still going along in that process too, because you look at what the wide receiver out of Louisiana that Oklahoma offered last week or whatever, KJ Daniels. I mean, that's a 3-star kid right now. So let's see where that recruitment winds up and where Oklahoma's in on his recruitment before it's all said and done. And there'll be more names like that as we go along. There were in this class. So it won't all always just be the David Stones of the world that we're talking about. And some of these guys that aren't maybe that 4 or 5-star kid right now will wind up that way. That's Oklahoma's already proven that that's going to be the case. They did it in the last class.
Yeah, we're not worried. The guys we talked to aren't worried. Nobody should really be worried. A lot of these guys are going to trend even higher as they go because, again, Oklahoma's done a really good job at identifying talent. And I mean, we saw it last year. Guys that were 3-star prospects became 4-star prospects. 4 stars became 5 stars. It's going to happen again this year as well. Josh, should we move to the hardwood where the Oklahoma Sooners got the men's team got a crazy win against Iowa State up in Ames, of all places, one of the better venues in the Big 12 right now. 11-point win, just a crazy win in a game that they were down big to start that game and then just went on a run to finish the first half before really taking over in the second half. They just shot it really well, and they played really, really good defense in this one.
Yeah, they frustrated Iowa State offensively. What did Iowa State end up shooting? Like sub 35%, I think, for the game, and even worse than that, sub 30 from 3-point range. So Oklahoma frustrated Iowa State defensively and obviously got to race away in the second half. Jacob Groves knocks down 4 of 5 3-pointers. Where the heck has that been for Oklahoma? But they found it in Ames. This team, man, it's I don't know. I say I don't have them figured out or they're unpredictable, and yet basically this team is this. They're really not very good, but every once in a while they're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and beat somebody that's good. That's basically who this OU team is right now. And they're going to lose close a lot. And then, you know what? When you think they're going to lose close, they're going to get blown out too. So it's that's why I say it's like I know this team, but I don't know this team, but I know this team. It's a weird team.
Yeah, it is a weird team, but it's a fun team to watch. I think they've really started just getting after it, playing a lot more aggressively and assertively at times over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of it, right after Porter Moser said, I'm not interested in the Notre Dame job. It's like this team found its second gear all of a sudden, found some life. And maybe some of the rumors that were out there started to get to them a little bit because, man, they were not playing inspired basketball during their 4-game losing streak. They've gone 2-2 with 2 top 25 wins over their last 4, close loss at Texas in overtime. And then, they were hanging tough and they were playing really well against Texas Tech. Texas Tech just had a really, really good shooting night. And then, and Oklahoma just struggled down the stretch. And that's kind of where that ended up. On the women's side of things, man, frustrating, just disappointing loss. They packed out the link, got 10,000 plus there. And I mean, that Texas defense, it is just something special and absolutely frustrated and took Oklahoma completely out of their game. They just couldn't do anything in the second half.
Yeah, disappointing. Disappointing that obviously you had one half that was good on the hardwood, and then honestly the more important half, Oklahoma wasn't able to find that win inside the LNC. But Coach Ginny Baranchek's building a juggernaut. Don't let it get twisted. She is building this thing the right way. I think she's going to be in Norman, Oklahoma for a very long time, and I think she's going to win big at Oklahoma. If not right now this season, I think the early writing is on the wall that Ginny Baranchek and Oklahoma are on a big-time upward trajectory, and I just can't wait to see what continues to happen the rest of this year for them once you get into, obviously, the Big 12 tournament, the big tournament, and then what happens going forward for Coach Baranchek and company.
All right, now that we've discussed some basketball, let's turn it back to football, as the commenters are suggesting, because, hey, we love football too. But one thing I want to ask, Josh, who do you think will have a breakout season in 2023 for the Oklahoma Sooners?
Well, I teased it earlier. Obviously, Would love for that to be on the defensive side of the football. And I think it's totally possible that we're talking about Danny Stutzman as one of the nation's finest at his position before the year's all said and done. But honestly, I'm looking at Gavin Sawchuk, man. Based on what I saw versus Florida State, I just think you got something really, really special cooking in the backfield at Oklahoma. So to me, I think that he's going to wind up being the number one running back at Oklahoma before next season's all said and done. I know Javonte Barnes, obviously nice start to his career, but man, when you've got that extra dimension that it looks like Gavin Sawchuk does, I just think it's going to be hard for Oklahoma going forward to not be giving him carries. So one guy that I feel really good about a breakout season, and I think there's a number of wide receivers we could talk about, and I'm really hopeful, again, in closing on this question, that it's a defensive player or two or three or four or five that we're talking about with breakout seasons. That would obviously be more impactful for Oklahoma, but who am I most confident to have a breakout season? Mr. Sawchuk. I think he's due for a big time sophomore year.
Yeah, I'll pick a defensive guy, though, that I do think will have a really big year, and that's Robert Spears-Jennings. I know this is like way under the radar, but and Oklahoma brought in a Reggie Pearson to play safety, but I think that Robert Spears-Jennings saw the Peyton Bowen recruitment, saw everything that people were saying about the safety position, watched Justin Broyles leave, and took a little bit of that to heart. I think he, was like, okay, say less. You're overlooking me a little bit. I'm gonna play with a little chip on my shoulder. Like, I can't remember what the exact wording was on Twitter, but it's like, it's kind of like bet. All right, here we go. And I really do think that that's a guy that plays with a lot of energy and a lot of intensity, plays fast, plays physical, and is somebody that I think could thrive in Oklahoma's defense. I think he's going to have a chance to be a breakout star next to Billy Bowman at safety next year. And kind of speaking on that front, is there a 2022 defensive signing that you think could really break out or step into a significant role for the Sooners?
Yeah, I'm probably looking backfield for Oklahoma. I'm probably thinking just judging off what Brent Venables said in his most recent media availability, where he brought all the newcomers in and said that football's easy for Peyton Bowen. Look, I know that that's the low-hanging fruit, but he's on my radar, man. That Peyton Bowen's the 5-star kid that comes in, and he's just special from day one. But I also think Vickers has got a chance. Really, a number of those defensive backs as signees, I think, have good chances. If PJ Adebawore can add a little bit of weight between now and then, I was a little bit surprised that he was and you say this, somebody's like 230 pounds, but I was a little bit surprised that he was as slight as he was when you first saw those first measurables for him. So he's obviously going to have a chance just because he's another 5-star kid. But it'd be great if it's any of these defensive signees. LeBlanc, they need help up front. You really can't go wrong, right? Any level of the defense. Let's hope a couple of these guys are defensive signees that shine. Who do you like?
Well, had I asked you about the 2023 signing class, those would all be great answers, Josh. But I asked you about the 2022 signing class.
Yes, you did.
From a year ago that signed with Oklahoma. Those are the ones I want to know about because they've spent a year in the program now. But I love all your answers about 2023, and I don't want you to think I don't like your answers. I think those are great answers. That wasn't the question, though, sir.
No, that is a fair catch on your behalf. Obviously, some of the names that we've talked about, I think R. Mason Thomas, just because we've seen a little production from R. Mason Thomas, he's an easy name, I think. Jaron Kanak, everybody's excited about the electricity there. That's an easy name defensively to look at. And then Gentry Williams, right? You're looking for defensive back help, somebody that's been around the block already for Oklahoma a little bit. So, I guess that's one at each level, right? R. Mason Thomas up front. Jaron Kanak, I don't think there's any doubt is going to be much more heavily featured at linebacker for OU. I think the McCullough move is a pretty clear indication that that's going to be a case or is going to be the case for Oklahoma. They can kind of put the puzzle pieces together on that. And then, I would hope that either a Gentry Williams or a Robert Spears-Jennings take a big-time leap. And Oklahoma needs that, man. If OU is going to be the type of team that's going to jump from 6-7 to being back to Oklahoma and playing for a Big 12 championship and perhaps winning it, then probably all of those guys, or at least 75% of those guys, we're going to have to end next season and say, okay, here's our report card. Yeah, it looks good. It's a B+ or above for Oklahoma.
I mean, the talent in the defensive backfield is significantly better than what it was a year ago. You added some really good players in Jaden Rowe and Gentry Williams and Robert Spears Jennings to your defensive secondary. And then you doubled down on that in the 2023 signing class with, Peyton Bowen and Makari Vickers and Josiah Wagner and Jacoby Johnson, Eric McCarty, Kendall Dolby out of the JUCO ranks. Like, you made some significant additions to your recruiting or your roster over the last 2 off seasons in the defensive backfield. Reggie Pearson through the transfer portal, that's going to make everybody better. The talent that they have and they've added is going to make everybody better. And so I love, I think, thinking of the transformation that the defensive backfield is going to undergo, because I think it's going to be a more physical and it's going to be a more intense defensive back group. They're not going to sit there. I'm sure that there will be times in which they're sitting there playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, but I think that they're going to be playing in people's faces. They're going to be contesting, catches a lot more. They're going to be, helping out and run support. They're going to be a much more physical and fast group as a whole. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that, because I think while there were issues in a lot of places defensively for Oklahoma last year, the last several years, over the course of the last several years, the Alex Grinch era, I felt like the defensive backfield was probably the area that was the biggest struggle. Guys didn't live up to their recruiting rankings, the expectations that came with those. And as a result, the defensive backfields weren't very good. They were inconsistent. Now you got, NFL caliber players in like Trey Norwood and Trey Brown, but you really didn't have much else. And those are 2 guys that continued their upward trajectory even as they left Norman. They were continuing to get better, whereas it seemed like for a lot of the guys, they kind of got stagnant or they plateaued and got worse. So the defensive backfield is kind of the biggest area that I'm looking at, like seeing a big step in improvement, seeing a big jump in production, in ability, just because of what they've added over the last 2 cycles and the last 2 off seasons in Norman. As we get ready for spring ball, go ahead, Josh. You want to say something?
Jaden Rowe, do we have an update on what's going on there?
I don't know if he's going to be ready until like fall ball, until August for camp.
And obviously that's going to be, it's going to really hamper his potential growth. But just because of the frame, if he is good to go then and, impresses quickly, then maybe, though obviously that almost feels like that's going to push it back a little bit for him. But just physically, because of what Oklahoma could use on the back end, I mean, I think that would be a great addition to have back there, and somebody that's reliable, 6'3", can go cover some people if he's, healthy and ready to go, could be a huge addition defensively.
Who do you think starts along the defensive line?
Oh man, it's gosh, that's so hard right now because you brought all the transfer portal additions in. That makes it incredibly difficult.
Can I offer a prediction?
You may.
Okay, so I think your defensive ends are going to be Ethan Downs and Rondell Bothroyd.
Okay.
I think your defensive tackles will be Isaiah Coe and Jordan Kelly.
Coe is definitely going to start, in my opinion, for Oklahoma.
I think in 4-man fronts, that's what it's going to look like. In 3-man fronts, it's definitely, to me, Downs, Coe, Bothroyd. Because you have a ton of size. You have guys that can both rush the passer and play the run. And then you get into like nickel situations. If you're playing nickel or pass rush situations, I think that's when you bring in R. Mason Thomas off the bench, and he probably substitutes for Ethan Downs, because you have Bothroyd out there who's a proven pass rusher. But I think you could bring in R. Mason, and then maybe even kick Ethan Downs, or kick Ethan Downs inside or kick Bothroyd inside and let them rush from a defensive tackle position. So that's kind of where I'd lean on that front.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see. We'll see what a couple of these additions out of the transfer portal, how it all fits in together. It's gonna be interesting. Sears, I mean, no chance for Sears, you don't think?
I mean, I think he'll be a solid rotational player. I think, I think he'll factor in similarly to like Jonah Lula, in that he'll be part of that defensive tackle rotation. Same with Jacob Lacey. But I just think like what we've seen from Kelly and Co. They've gotten better, and they got better last year. And I think they had really good years as kind of the backup defensive tackles. And I think they'll take another step this offseason and continue to improve. A lot of it, like the familiarity, I think the coaches appreciate familiarity. And so while the transfers will have a significant role, I don't necessarily think Jacob Lacey or Sears will be starters. Now, circle back in 8 months and this could all change. We might, hear buzz elsewhere, but those are the two guys I feel like played really, really well for Oklahoma and got better during the season. I mean, they splashed and they made splash plays in the Cheez-It Bowl for Oklahoma along the defensive line. So yeah, let me look at those guys. I think those are the two that I'm kind of identifying early as far as who could potentially start in 4-man fronts for the Sooners.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting names up front just because of all of the transfer portal additions. You think about Ford, Sears, Lacey, obviously Bothroyd, who you talked about. I honestly up front, I think I probably like what I've seen just individually to their position. I probably like what I've seen consistently from Isaiah Coe, honestly, the most out of anybody. And I'm surprised that Oklahoma fans, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn on this, but I feel like the hype train is not nearly as high for an Isaiah Coe, and yet I feel like he just gives you such steady play that across the board, everywhere else, it's kind of like, maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be great. But Isaiah Coe, I feel like maybe you're not going to get the most electric play inside for Oklahoma, but look, my man's going to be steady as she goes. And I think Isaiah Coe deserves a little bit more credit for that than maybe probably he always gets.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's an important aspect and an important quality to have along the defensive line. It's like, this guy does his job. It's not always flashy. It's not always spectacular. It doesn't always fill up the stat sheet, but he does his job and he's reliable. And that's why he got as many snaps as he did, even though he was a backup defensive tackle. At times he started games, if I remember right. So I think that's a guy to really look forward to and seeing and expecting kind of a bigger season for, because he's a guy that can play in 3-man fronts. He can play in 4-man fronts, and he can give you, like you said, that steady play. And so I think it's important to watch. Later this week, we'll continue to dig into, spring ball predictions, projections, position battles to watch. We'll mention baseball. We'll talk about baseball as well. They had a big weekend, won the season series or the weekend series over Ryder, got a big run rule win on Sunday in the rubber match, but baseball, you're going to have to continue to do more to make sure you're on everybody's radar. But, a solid start to the season. They've got some work to do to continue to get better. But man, all week long, we'll get you ready. There's a big recruiting weekend. It's going to be coming up this weekend in Norman, one of 2 in the month of March. So we'll talk about that as well. But Josh, any parting thoughts as we head out the door on tonight's episode of Locked On Sooners Live?
Oh, I just think, obviously we're inside of 2 months away, believe it or not, from the spring game for Oklahoma. So, and what do they start? They start practice on the 22nd of March. Do I have that date right? Maybe I'm way off. Maybe it's way sooner than that, but let me double check that before I start spouting off the wrong stuff. But long story short is we're not too far away from talking a little bit more. I don't know if intimately is the right word. That's probably not the right. With greater education and clarity on what some of these position battles look like and how some of the newcomers look. So that's going to be fun throughout the spring. That question to close right there from Dominic about Kobe McKenzie. I think that there's some other guys that have kind of leapfrogged in front of Kobe McKenzie is sort of the buzz I hear. I know everybody's excited about a Jaron Kanik, but I hear really good things privately about a Kip Lewis, that the coaching staff is pretty high on some of the things that Kip Lewis has done, and not necessarily as much maybe for Kobe McKenzie, which frankly to me is a little bit surprising, John, but these are some of the storylines we will be discussing and following as obviously we progress throughout the spring here. But just want to say thank you to all of you. Hope everybody's safe. Hope your homes and everything are all good. I know we're in the storm season now, and it hit us pretty good last night in the state of Oklahoma. But just thank you guys for your continued support of Locked On Sooners. And until next time.
Yep. Thanks for joining the show, being part of it every Monday night, 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 Eastern for those of you on the East Coast. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Again, subscribe to Locked On Sooners wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube, hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. But until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll catch you then. Boomer Sooner.